Oh my God, you're here. Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألف لام را تلك آيات الكتاب المبين إنا أنزلناه قرآنا عربيا لعلكم تعقلون رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي فالحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Once again, everybody, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Today is my final session on the parallels between Musa alayhi salam and Yusuf alayhi salam. I've tried to consolidate the end of the story and kind of combine things. So the timeline won't be as clear today because there are some parallels between the two stories that don't sync in terms of timeline, but in terms of theme, they do connect with each other. So you'll see that, inshallah. There is another important parallel that should be drawn. That inshallah ta'ala I'll cover that in the course of my lecture series on the surah. So I don't want to take too much time in the intro and not get into the surah. But there are some other thematic items from the surah that I think will come up as we get into the surah itself and the story itself. And one of the most important ones is the parallels not only between Yusuf alayhi salam and Musa alayhi salam, but the parallels between Yusuf alayhi salam and our messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and the connection between there's an interesting connection between our messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Yusuf alayhi salam, and Ibrahim alayhi salam. These three prophets are connected to each other in a very interesting way in the Quran. So we'll come to that too, inshallah, when the time comes. But anyway, let's get to it. Now we've already talked about the fact that they were in years of isolation. So Musa alayhi salam was out in the desert, and Musa alayhi salam was out in the desert. Yusuf alayhi salam was in the prison for those many years, and now they're going to be able to confront their aggressors. Right, so Yusuf alayhi salam is going to come back and challenge the women and say, go ask those women what happened to those women that cut their hands. So he's going to want them to have their day in court. And Musa alayhi salam on the flip side is going to come back and confront the Pharaoh in the court. So there's going to be a day in court on both sides. So that's where we're picking up from now towards that resolution and eventually the final confrontation and how everything comes to a close. So the interesting parallel, the Quran mentions particularly Yusuf alayhi salam's king's dream, that he saw 7 lean cows, 7 fat cows and all of that. On the other side, the Bible tells us, the Quran only alludes to it indirectly, that the Pharaoh actually also saw a dream. Some might ask, where in the Quran does it say that? You could argue that in Surah Al-Qasas when Allah says, وَنُرِيَ فِرْعَوْنَ وَهَمَانَ وَجُنُودَهُمَا مِنْهُمْ مَا كَانُوا يَحْذَرُونَ, that Allah intended out of the Israelites to show the Pharaoh and Haman, his top lieutenant, and their armies the thing they were afraid of. Because the biblical account is that the Pharaoh did have a nightmare sort of scenario in which he saw that one of the Israelite babies is going to rise up against him, grow up and rise up against him and cause the downfall of the kingdom. In fact, that dream was true. So in both cases, kings see a dream and the dream happens to be true in the case of Fir'aun and in the case of Musa alayhi salam. Okay, so they both see a dream. The other thing that's common between the two dreams is that they have to do with the fate of the empire. So the empire will collapse, the kingdom will collapse if the king's dream and the story of Yusuf is not addressed and the economic policies that need to be put in place are not put in place. Similarly, if the Israelites, if that prophet that will come, that messenger that will come, if he's not heeded, the kingdom will fall. So they're both concerned with the fate of the empire. The king doesn't know in the story of Yusuf alayhi salam what his dream means. That's why he needs help figuring it out. But it seems that Musa alayhi salam's story, the Pharaoh's dream, was pretty explicit. It was pretty straightforward that it's one of the Israelite babies. There was no cows in the story. There was nothing ambiguous, some symbol that represented something else, right? So he took action on his own and decided to kill the Israelite children, every now and then and purge the Israeli community, the Bani Israel community. Anyhow, then you have, as per the dream, Yusuf alayhi salam's interpretation led to good years that prepared them for bad years to come, right? But in the case, hold on, let the emergency vehicle pass. Okay, so in the case of Musa alayhi salam, you've got difficult years. وَلَقَدْ أَخَذْنَا آلَ فِرْعَوْنَ بِالسِّنِينَ, we grabbed a hold of the people of the Pharaoh for a number of years. This is talking about the years of the 9 signs. And Allah says He gave them those 9 terrible signs, the locust and the frogs and the blood and all of those signs. He gave them those, لَعَلَّهُمْ يَضَّرَّعُونَ. Hopefully they'll become humble. Now the point is, they were given those 9 signs in the Pharaoh's kingdom, in the prophethood of Musa alayhi salam. They were given those signs, so hopefully they don't have to face something much worse. Right? Allah says, وَلَنُذِيقَنَّهُمُ الْعَذَابَ الْأَدْنَى دُونَ الْعَذَابِ الْأَكْبَرِ دُونَ الْعَذَابِ الْأَكْبَرِ. We will make them taste the smallest punishments before the biggest punishments. Kind of like, the English figure of speech, the cloud before the storm. Right? So the fact that they saw those 9 signs should have been enough for them to ward off a much worse scenario. So you've got from bad and you're trying to save from something worse. The flip is the case in the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. They've got good days and they're preparing for worse days. Right? And in Musa alayhi salam's scenario, they've got bad days that are hopefully, if they take heed, will lead to good days. But they don't take heed, of course. And that's the other interesting thing. That in the case of, I'll get to that because I've written it out. Let's go back to the cellmates for a second. Yusuf alayhi salam's cellmate, eventually he didn't give credit to Yusuf alayhi salam, but he said, I can figure out this dream for you, remember? And he tried to take advantage and get a promotion for himself. But in the end, whether he intended to or not, he ends up having, because when he came back with this interpretation of the dream, the king knew that this guy didn't get this on his own. He clearly went to someone. So he tells, where did you get it from? And he can't perjure himself in front of the king. He's going to get killed. So he kind of spills his guts and says it was Yusuf alayhi salam. So basically, it's the cellmate that the one that testified in court. He's the reason that Yusuf alayhi salam got acknowledged as the savior of Egypt. You have another similar interesting parallel in the story of Musa alayhi salam. You've got his friend, who's the only other individual you find in the story of Musa alayhi salam that speaks out in court. So you've got the cellmate calling for Yusuf indirectly, and then you've got Musa's friend in Surah Ghafir calling for Musa, saying, you need to heed the warnings of Musa because today you have kingdom, but Allah will destroy it if you don't take Musa's warning. So he's actually calling on Musa alayhi salam as the savior of Egypt also in the king's court, in the Pharaoh's court also. But there is a difference between the two, but I've separated that as a separate comparison so that you can see it more clearly. Now, Yusuf alayhi salam wants to stand before the king. He wants his day in court. Like he's in jail and he says, no, give me my trial. Call those women. So he wants to go. But if you study the story of Musa alayhi salam, when Allah first told him he has to go back to the Pharaoh, he said, wait, I really? The Pharaoh? But he's commanded to go stand before the king. Right? So one wants to be there and the other one has been commanded and then empowered to be there. That's an interesting stark contrast. And this is where you learn sometimes it may be a similar situation, but some people are ready to face it, and other people are not. And also, there is a difference because Yusuf alayhi salam was in fact innocent. He hadn't done anything wrong. So he's very bold in coming and standing trial. Musa alayhi salam is afraid that they're going to kill him because he does have a crime recorded against him. Right? He's not afraid of standing in front of justice, but he isn't afraid of his crime being not understood properly and then him being judged unfairly on top. So it's a fearful thing to stand in front of an unfair judge. When you know the judge is known to be one of the most unfair human beings on earth, it's kind of nerve-wracking that you're going to go to his trial or go to his court. So we might find ourselves in those two different kinds of situations. And if one fears, being placed at the mercy of people that are ruthless, then it's understandable that they may have reluctance. But it may also be that Allah just imposes that situation on you because you have to fight through it. And you have to be brave enough to stand before it. And that's what Allah did with the case of Musa alayhi salam. So again, in the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, it's interesting, he asked the king, Ma balun niswa. He said, go ask your master, meaning the king, what was the case of those women that cut their hands? So he wants to ask that question. And on the other hand, Musa's not asking any questions, he's being asked questions. I was like, oh, what did you do? What's that thing that you did? وَفَعَلْتَ فَعَلَتَكَ الَّتِي فَعَلْتَ وَأَنْتَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ أَلَمْ نُرَبِّكَ فِينَا وَلِيدًا. He's the one that's being questioned. So the one who's innocent is posing the questions to his aggressors, his false accusers, his slanderers. And on the other hand, the one who had made a mistake is being interrogated. Now, of course, Yusuf alayhi salam in court proves his innocence. And by contrast, Musa alayhi salam, when he's called out, did you do what you did? He said, فَعَلْتُهَا إِذَنْ. I did it. He admits his guilt. So Incredible contrast from the beginning to the end. One went into jail, the other escaped jail. One proves his innocence, the other admits his guilt. One wants to go to court, the other one is commanded to go to court. So there's remarkable parallels and contrast between the two. After all of it's settled and done, the king in the story of Yusuf alayhi salam says, "Astakhlishu li nafsi." I want to keep this one exclusively as my advisor for myself, my personal advisor. And he calls him Amin. It's interesting. I'll come back to that word. You are now safe, Makin. You're now safe, ladayya. And then he says Amin. Amin means safe also. It can also mean trustworthy. So he finds Yusuf alayhi salam what? Trustworthy. And trustworthiness is part of the reason he hires him. Okay? But of course, on top of that, I can't wait to get to that part of the story, and when I'm talking about this in detail, when Yusuf alayhi salam was given that position by the king, he didn't just say, "Thank you, I really appreciate that you made me a personal advisor." He said, "Hold on, make me the minister of finance." I appreciate the advisor job, but actually, everybody here is incompetent, they don't know what they're doing, and a lot of people are going to starve to death. So I didn't just interpret this dream so you could say, "Oh wow, that's what it means." I'm playing the role of saving a lot of people from starving to death, and nobody here can handle this economic crisis the way I can. So appoint me minister of the treasures of the land. Ala khaza'in al-ard. Inni hafidhun alim. I will safeguard this duty and I know what I'm doing. So he didn't just, the king promoted him, but it's like Yusuf alayhi salam said, "No, that's not enough of a promotion. I need a little more than that." And it's not self-promotion, you have to understand. He's doing this because he realized lives are at stake. And he knows he has something to offer, so he puts himself forward. When we get to that part in the story, inshallah, what I will talk to everybody about and remind myself of is the fine line between humility and arrogance. Right? There, on the one hand, someone says, no, I can't do it. I'm nothing, I'm nobody. I'm just a worthless slave of Allah, etc., etc. Super humble, right? You're like walking in ruku everywhere you go. That's one extreme. And the other extreme is, I got this. I got it. I can do it. Nobody else can do it like I can. We're going to make the virus great again, etc., etc. So you've got two extremes. You've got overly humble and you've got overly arrogant. And the fine balance in between is confidence. It's confidence. Confidence with humility, actually. And that's what we're going to learn in the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, is that balance between those two sides. That confidence and that humility at the same time. And so because too much confidence will become what? Arrogance. And too little confidence will be weakness. And it's undermining the gift Allah gave you. So you got to find a way in between. So that's what we're going to learn in his story. But anyway, I digress. So the king promotes him. But after the exchange with Musa alayhi salam, the king what? Does the opposite. "I'm going to throw you in jail." He threatens him. He threatens him. So, and actually, in a sense, he demotes him too, because he used to live there as royalty, and now he's living there as an enemy of the state, right? So one has a promotion and one has a demotion. Actually, that's happening. Now, it's remarkable that Yusuf alayhi salam's divine gift was his ability to interpret dreams, right? So it's his dreams that ensure that Egypt remains prosperous, isn't it? It's his interpretation of dreams that ensures Egypt's prosperity. The divine miracles given to Musa alayhi salam are the signs. And the signs undo Egypt's prosperity. The locust comes and destroys the crop. The ticks come and people are diseased. Now we know what happens when a disease is widespread to the economy. It's easier for us to understand nowadays. Crop is destroyed. Manpower is destroyed. Tornadoes and hurricanes come and infrastructure is destroyed. Then the water is contaminated with blood and the water supplies, and therefore future agriculture is destroyed. So everything is unraveling for the Egyptian empire. Everything is starting to fall apart. So here you have Yusuf alayhi salam's gift from Allah, the interpretation of dream, given only by Allah, that saves Egypt's economy and ensures that Egypt remains prosperous. And on the flip side, Musa alayhi salam is given 9 signs, and those 9 signs ensure that the economy of Egypt and the well-being of Egypt is crippled. Their power as a nation is crippled. So the opposite effect is happening from divine intervention. Then, he said, This is actually not in the timeline directly, but there's an interesting contrast going back in the story of Musa. There are two job positions. Yusuf, Minister of Finance, Musa, shepherd for the family in Madian. Right? Because he's going to get that job when he says, the father says, I want to marry one of my two daughters to you, but you got to work for me 8 to 10 years. Right? So he's going to get a job there. So it's interesting that one is made, the one who is given government position. And the one who used to have a government position got a job as a shepherd. Right, in the story. So it's flipped. And then, I told you this before, I'm bringing it back to you now. Yusuf alayhi salam was hired based on his honesty. The first thing that the king saw, this guy was honest, this man was honest, alayhi salam, who was thrown in jail for no reason. And he stands with integrity. And all these women vouch for his character now. Now we can't say anything about him. We got nothing on him. That was us, right? So the first thing was his honesty, meaning his character. And the second thing on top of that was his skill. What's his skill? His ability to interpret whatever's being said, the dream or other speech. So there are two things that are mentioned in this hire. The first thing is this person honest? When you hire somebody, it makes sense, right? Is the person trustworthy? And then on top of that, do they have the skills needed for the job? And what's the skill needed for this job? Interpretation, intelligence. That's what Yusuf alayhi salam demonstrates. So he checks both boxes, he gets the job. On the flip side, Musa alayhi salam got hired because the girl actually told her father, Ya abat ista'jirhu, inna khayra man ista'jarta al-qawiyyul amin. She says, Dad, hire him. The best person you can hire is someone strong and someone who can be trusted. Amin again. The best hire based on trust. And okay, but trust isn't enough. If he's trustworthy but he can't pull a sheep, the sheep is pulling him, he's not strong enough, then his trustworthiness doesn't really get us anywhere. So he has to have the skill needed for that job. And what's his special ability? Strength. That's what got him in trouble in the first place, right? So that's actually the two skills are on the one hand knowledge and know-how, and the other physical strength. And to this day, basically, any job you do in the world is either some intellectual skill you possess, some interpretive, some analytical, some know-how that you possess that gets you a job, or you have some physical ability that gets you a job. Either you're and you're using not just your knowledge, but your physical talents in some way. Your strength physically is required. And those are the two dimensions of work that are highlighted on two, but the common factor is kept. And what's the common factor? Trustworthiness. It's also pretty interesting that in the case of Yusuf alayhi salam, trustworthiness was mentioned first, and the skill was mentioned second. And in the case of Musa, it was flipped. It was the strength was mentioned first, and then the trustworthiness was mentioned second, so they're reversed from each other. Now, this is another side parallel, but since, I brought up Musa alayhi salam said, the daughter said, hire him, right? Daughter told the dad, when she heard the story from behind the curtain, she told her dad, hire Musa. But what she really meant was, Dad, let me marry him. Allow him to be in this family. Because if he hires him, he's going to live in that house for 8 to 10 years or however long, and you've got two young unmarried women, and now you've got this young man that doesn't make for a good combination for so many years. The only way for this to work is that this becomes a family matter. And so the easy way to do that is for him to get married. But she's modest in the way she says it to her father, so she says, hire him. But he understood what she's saying. He could understand his daughter's code. But the point is, it's a beautiful story about how Musa alayhi salam got married. And that's actually Allah's intent for humanity, for men and women to come together in a noble, respectful, honorable relationship. For families to come together. And it's okay for her to like him and to even suggest him. It's not even like Musa alayhi salam proposed to the girl. It's actually the girl that proposed to her father to say to Musa alayhi salam, can, hook me up. This is a good catch. And she's smart because she works outside. She works as a shepherdess, right? So she deals with nasty men all the time. So she knows when she sees a decent man. So she could tell, because she's out in the real world. She's not a sheltered girl, these two girls. They're living in a harsh reality. There's a reason they don't give their animals drink with everybody else, because that environment isn't conducive for women to be there. And even if they are, they're going to find perverts and other kinds of men. So they wait until all the flock is done, then they go feed their animals. There's a reason they stay behind. But when they saw the character of Musa alayhi salam and the strength of him, they need a strong man in the family because of the kind of society clearly it is. And they need a dignified man. And this is, I know that, she might even be wondering, she goes out to work every day. She sees men all over the place and she would think to herself, man, God forbid I end up with one of these monkeys. Right? That might be the case in her head, but now she sees a good candidate, so she makes the case to her dad. Now, this is Allah again describing in very beautiful terms how men and women should come together. It's okay to have some level of like, and then you take the dignified road. You don't cross any lines that Allah doesn't want you to cross, and you inform the family, let it be known, done with it. Okay, and the father immediately doesn't even hesitate, makes the deal. Musa alayhi salam says, sign me up, I'm good. هَذَا مَا بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَكَ. This is between you and me, deal. On the flip side, in the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, where I should have started, you've got a story about how a man and a woman should not be coming together. What should not be happening between men and women? Because she's got some emotional issues, she's got some kind of a broken marriage, she feels a lack of attention or whatever's going on with her, and she finds Yusuf alayhi salam is always there, always respectful, always a good listener, always available, he does whatever that sounds like a good package to me. But, and she's not, I don't believe, because in Surah Al-A'raf, when Allah describes the trick of the devil, He says, فَدَلَّهُمَا بِغُرُورٍ. He reeled them both in little by little. Right? So she also didn't just one day said, come here. She's trying to get his attention for a while. She's been fishing for a while. Like she's probably sitting there fake crying one time, see if he comes and says, are you okay? And there's all kinds of attention seeking things like those women did. Right? But none of that's working, or, even if she gets a little bit of innocent attention from him, she interprets that as something else. Because she's got a twisted mind. Right? But that's Allah describing how men and women are not supposed to approach one another. In fact, there's even a contrast in the way she approached him, shamelessly. And in the way this girl approached Musa, tamshi ala istihya, walked modestly over, and walked shyly and reluctantly. So there's this beautiful contrast. And this is Allah Azza wa Jal teaching us something about relationships themselves. May Allah protect all of us. Okay, so then Yusuf alayhi salam, he, when later on in the story, it's a little bit complicated, but in order to simplify it, there are actually 3 encounters. So when there's the economic drought, when the 7 bad years start, Yusuf's family runs out of food. They're all the way in Canaan. They're not in Egypt, but they run out of food. But the empire is in Egypt. The capital is in Egypt. So they're going to come now to ask for welfare, to ask for food. When they come asking for food, Yusuf recognizes them, وَهُمْ لَهُ مُنْكِرُونَ, and they have no clue who he is. But they don't have the youngest brother with them. They don't have the youngest brother with them, Binyamin, he's not with them. Okay. Yusuf alayhi salam says, I'm not providing you because you didn't bring all of your family. Go bring your brother. You have a brother? He's on record that, because they probably have like a census, like social security numbers type thing. This social security number is missing. Where is he? Oh no, you're not getting anything. You need to come back with him. Right? So he sends them back. When they go back, they told their dad, we're not getting any food until we bring him. But when they open their bags are full of food anyway. So even though Yusuf told them, I'm not giving you anything until you bring him back, they actually got a full load of food anyway. And they're like, Dad, he's going to give us double this if we take him back. It's an easy deal. Like they didn't have to come back, but now they're enticed, right? Because they already have a year's supply of food and they're going to get doubled. Right? So they somehow convince their dad to go back, and then, Binyamin comes back, and then when he recognizes him, then the scheme is hashed of the cup being placed in the bag. You might know about that, right? And then he's being detained. When he's being detained, they try to make a case. Can you please not detain him? Anybody else? Because إِنَّ لَهُ أَبًا شَيْخًا كَبِيرًا, he's got a dad who's a big sheikh. Big sheikh, a sheikh kabir means big sheikh. But I didn't translate the phrase on purpose, so I talked to you about it. Sheikh in Arabic means old man. And kabir can even highlight even further in old age. An extremely old man. His dad is an extremely old, frail man. He's sensitive. The trauma of losing this child might be too much for him. So the way they describe their dad is what? Sheikh Kabir. On the flip side, when Musa alayhi salam helped those 2 girls at the water, they said, we can't feed our animals until the flock is done. Wa abuna shaykhun kabir. And our dad is a big sheikh. And the only 2 times Sheikh Kabir is used, a very extremely old man. The only time it's used is once in the story of Yusuf and once in the story of Musa alayhi salam. So even from a literary point of view, these nuggets are dropped connecting the two. Like if you did a word search on Sheikh Kabir, the only two you'd find are these two in the entire Quran, 23 years of revelation. So as small as that small piece is, it's remarkable. And by the way, a contrast is important here too. What it means for us, the sons, they don't like the brother. They don't like Binyamin. In fact, the first thing they said is, if he stole, he had a brother who used to steal too. That's what they said, meaning Yusuf alayhi salam. And they're not even calling him his brother. They're saying he used to have a brother. Like he's not one of us really, because some narrators say, some mufassirun say, he's from a different marriage. Right? So those two siblings, meaning Yusuf and Binyamin, are from a different marriage, and the others are from a different marriage. Right? So they don't see him really as the brother. Which is, by the way, a really interesting little nugget in the Quran about complex families. That there may be families in which some children are from one mother and some children are from another mother. That the husband and wife that are married, they may have children of their own previously, and now the families are together, and there can be some animosity between siblings of different mothers. Because they're not really my sibling, they're not really my, and so there can be that kind of tension, and that clearly exhibits itself in the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. And it's an unhealthy thing. Look at what kind of evil it led to. How far did that go? And so when they say, please let him go, our dad is an old man, they don't really like him. They're taking advantage of the fact that their dad is old, and they want pity for their dad being old, so they can circumvent the law in some way. If you flip the script, on the other side in Musa alayhi salam's story, these young women were so defiant and confident, they said, our dad is too old to work, and that's why we work. And they weren't looking for pity. They were almost like, back off. We're going to do our work until they're done because our dad's too old to work. And Shaykhun Kabir has a dual meaning. It could also mean someone who's a big deal. So it's almost as if they're telling Musa alayhi salam, back off, our dad's a big deal, okay? Like, they don't know he's alayhi salam. Actually, he doesn't even know yet he's alayhi salam. He hasn't gone to the mountain yet. He's just a young man at that age. So there's the term being used to draw pity for oneself, and the term being used in its appropriate place is also contrasted with the two uses of Sheikh Kabir. Then Yusuf is reunited with his brother, the brother that means well for him, Binyamin. And right before they confront the rest of the family, right? So there's a reunion. And Musa alayhi salam is going to go confront Fir'aun. But right before he confronts him, he's going to have a reunion with who? Harun alayhi salam. So two brothers are having reunions before the actual showdown and the confrontation takes place in both stories. Yusuf alayhi salam is a support to Binyamin. He awa ilayhi akhahu, he gave him refuge. Meaning Yusuf was the strength for his younger brother. Yusuf alayhi salam was the strength of his younger brother. On the flip side, Musa alayhi salam asked for Harun to be the support for him. Right? So Yusuf, the prophet, is being the support, and on the other hand, Harun alayhi salam, ushdud bihi azri wa ashrikhu fi amri, make him the strength of my back, and make him a partner in my mission. So he needs the support of Harun alayhi salam. In Yusuf's case, alayhi salam, when he gives the advice, the king takes it. And in Musa's case, when he gives the advice to come back to Allah, the king rejects it. This is famously known. But it's interesting, the contrast too. Why would a king take a prophet's advice? Well, his advice meant Egypt's worldly well-being, didn't it? It was the economic triumph of Egypt that was at stake. It wasn't their akhirah at stake. It was their dunya at stake, wasn't it? But when Musa alayhi salam spoke to Fir'aun, what was at stake? It was their salvation, it was their akhirah that was at stake. He wasn't talking about their economic collapse or anything else. Even though Allah took that away from them just to humble them, but even that wasn't enough to humble them. Still couldn't look towards the akhirah. But it's remarkable that the advice of Yusuf alayhi salam was for the betterment of their dunya, and the advice of Musa alayhi salam was for the betterment of their akhirah. That's another remarkable contrast. I know I didn't change the numbers properly yet. Okay. So Yusuf alayhi salam brought with him what saved the kingdom. That's already obvious to all you guys. And by contrast, Musa alayhi salam brought with him what ended the kingdom. Binyamin is helpful by staying silent. Right? Because don't tell your brothers, let's just keep this between us. So he's going to stay silent until things play out. It's interesting that Harun in the Quran also stays silent in the story of Musa alayhi salam, even though Musa alayhi salam said about him, "Huwa afsahu minni lisanan," he's well spoken, better spoken than I am. He's more articulate than I am, and yet he didn't speak. So you've got two brothers that remain silent yet supportive. Okay. Then you've got astakhlishu li nafsi. The king says, so impressed with Yusuf, he says, I want him just for myself. I'll keep him for myself. And eventually the Pharaoh is so tired of Musa alayhi salam, he says, Dharuni aqtul Musa. Let me kill Musa myself. Exact opposite from the other story. Now Yusuf alayhi, this is a really cool part to me personally. You've got two trials. You've got Yusuf bringing his family to trial. Right? Because he's in a position of being a judge now. He's the minister now. He's the governor now. And they're coming, and then he says, do you remember what you did to Yusuf and his brother? And he puts them on trial. On the flip side, Musa alayhi salam is not the judge, he's the one being judged in the court of Fir'aun. So you've got two courts. One judge is a prophet. The most fair judge you can have is a prophet, Yusuf alayhi salam. And the other judge is a Fir'aun, literally the Fir'aun. He's the judge. And in one case, the prophet is judging the aggressors, and in the other, the aggressor is judging the prophet. SubhanAllah, it's flipped. And Allah is showing us the reality of the world. You will find judges or people in a position to judge that may play the role of Yusuf, meaning they may be fair judges. And you might find people in a position of judgment, maybe on a bench in a court of law, or even in a family or other situations that are like Fir'aun, that have arrogance and pride, and they're in a position of judgment, and they're unfair and cruel in the way that they pass judgment. Then you've got Yusuf alayhi salam, he reminds them of what they did. Right? He reminds them of their crime. And of course, when Musa alayhi salam brought the truth, Fir'aun reminded him, didn't you kill somebody? Didn't you do what you did? Didn't I raise you here? So he's reminding them. But he's reminding them for the right reasons, to resolve the situation. Fir'aun is reminding him to deflect from the crime that he's committing of enslaving the Israelites. The sons of Israel, this is pretty awesome also, literally the sons of Israel are the criminals in the story of Yusuf. If you were to call them a name, you would call them Bani Israel. They're the aggressors. And in the story of Musa alayhi salam, they're the victims. The children of Israel are the victims. So the scenario has been flipped. They went from being the aggressor to being the one that's being oppressed later, generations later. Then two sajdas in the story. Hard to find another story in which you have a sajda in the Quran like that. You've got the brothers see the miracle of the rescue and the rise of Musa alayhi salam, or Yusuf alayhi salam, and they're so humbled before Allah that they what? Fall in sajda. The magicians see the remarkable miracle given to Musa alayhi salam, and they what? Fall in sajda. They fall in sajda. So you've got two stories in which sajda happens, and it happens at the site of a miraculous event. You know, so the recognition of Yusuf alayhi salam was a miraculous event, and the staff turning into a snake was a miraculous event. And of course, as a larger, taking a step back, the blessing of being settled into the wealthiest empire on earth at the time. It was a blessing. But over just a few generations, what did it turn into? It turned into the curse of slavery. On the flip side, being exiled for your life, you have to leave the night before. You didn't get to pack your bags or nothing, and now you're out starving in the desert, and dehydrating in the desert seems like a curse. But what did Allah do? In just a few generations, He turned that into وَنُمَكِّنَ لَهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ. He gave the Israelites the most vast empire ever had on earth, surpassing even the pharaohs. The kingdom of Dawood alayhi salam and the Khilafah of Dawood alayhi salam and Sulaiman alayhi salam, etc., surpassed even the pharaohs. It was the greatest empire ever on earth. And He even gave them rule over, through the Khilafah of those prophets, gave them rule over mountains, birds, ants, animals. My goodness. Right? So what started as a blessing turned into powerlessness. And what started as a powerless state in the desert turned into the mightiest empire in history. The Israelite empire, under the rule of prophets, alayhimus salam. Allah is telling us, وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ وَلَوْلَا دَفْعُ اللَّهِ النَّاسَ بَعْضَهُمْ بِبَعْضٍ لَفَسَدَتِ الْأَرْضِ. In the Quran, Allah says, if Allah didn't push one people out of power and put others in their place, and later on push them out of power and put some others in their place, then the entire earth would become corrupt. What Allah is teaching us is an empire comes, it may be based on justice and good values, and it becomes stronger and stronger. But it gets too strong, its justice and its values start disappearing, and it starts becoming corrupt. And when it starts becoming corrupt, Allah pushes them out and brings someone new in place. And that's the course of history. He doesn't let one empire, one dynasty stay in power forever. Nobody gets to stay forever. Everybody thought they're going to stay forever. Every empire that ever came on earth, when they looked at the vastness of their empire and the stretches of their army and the control that they had, they said, how is this ever going to go away? Like the farmer looked at his garden and said, "Ma adhunnu an tabida hadhihi abada." I don't think this can ever fall apart. I don't think so. I don't see how. And that's exactly when Allah shows you how. That's exactly what Allah shows you. So Quran isn't just a book of history. Quran is telling you how history works. It's the formula. Allah has a sunnah. Allah has a sunnah. Allah has a way of doing things, has a way of bringing nations up and bringing nations down. وَنُرِيدُ أَن نَمُنَّ الَّذِينَ اسْتُضْعِفُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ. We intended to take those who were made weak in the land and give them an extra favor. وَنَجْعَلَهُمْ أَئِمَّةً. And we intended to make them leaders. وَنَجْعَلَهُمُ الْوَارِثِينَ. And we intended to make them those who inherit the land. Inherit the land from the superpowers of the past. وَنُمَكِّنَ لَهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ. And to give them power and station in the land. That's Allah's formula. And that's a sociological and political science study in the Quran by itself. How do nations rise and fall? Particularly the Israelite people, because they've had rises and they've had falls. Right? So, لَتُفْسِدُنَّ فِي الْأَرْضِ مَرَّتَيْنِ وَلَا تَعْلُنَّ عُلُوًا كَبِيرًا. Quran in Surah Al-Isra will describe about the Israelites, they will have 2 rises and 2 falls. And that study is really important. Also from a hadith tradition that some contest the authenticity of, but I find it very compelling read. The Prophet ﷺ says that لَيَأْتِيَنَّ عَلَى أُمَّتِي مَا أَتَى عَلَى بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ حَزْوَ النَّعْلِ بِالنَّعْلِ. Like the same thing will happen to the Israelites, or the same thing that happened to the Israelites will happen to my people, like a shoe compared to another. Right? So our history, now it's been a millennium and a half. Our history, if we really want to understand its patterns, then one possible way to understand its patterns is to understand the patterns of Israelite history, all the way up to the coming of the Prophet ﷺ. Anyhow, which is why the Israelite history is such a big deal in the Quran. Look at how much space is being given to it, right? Because we're not just reading about them. We're not just learning about those prophets and that nation and those times. We're learning something about ourselves. The Ummah will find itself in positions like Yusuf, falsely imprisoned, powerless, subservient. We might find ourselves where our own brothers are killing us or trying to kill us, or feel happy when we get pushed away. The Ummah might find itself in the position where Yusuf a.s. found himself, right? We might find ourselves in the position of Musa a.s., where we may have had some position of authority or some place, and then we've been pushed out of it, and we've been isolated. So there are parallels from these stories that apply to our ummah. May Allah Azza wa Jal give us the wisdom and guidance to learn from that. Okay, so Yusuf alayhi salam, in the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, remember that when the drought happened, they come looking for food, right? That's why they came to Egypt, looking for food. And by contrast, Musa alayhi salam helps them escape Egypt. When they're out in the desert, they're asking for food. The Israelites look for food in both stories. Once to come to Egypt, once they come out of Egypt. But the food situation doesn't get resolved. Yusuf alayhi salam, this is remarkable. This is one of those things, all of these are remarkable to me. I'm not telling you to be wowed by them. I personally am, which is why I share what I share with you, because I'm just mesmerized by the architecture of these stories. And to think for a moment that this is not a storyteller. This is Allah, the architect of human history. Like He designed the events and locations and dates and people and lives in a way that plays out like an author would have written it in a fictional account. And yet this is actual events. And what happens in the story of Yusuf alayhi salam? First, he was wronged by his own people, right? And then later on, when he got thrown in jail, he was wronged by the Egyptians. So first, wronged by your own, then wronged by the Egyptians. Story of Musa, the script is flipped. First, he's wronged by the Egyptians when they try to kill him. Then he crosses the desert. He's with his own people. And who's wronging him when he's in the desert? His own people. لِمَ تُؤْذُنَنِي, why are you causing me pain? Why are you causing me pain? لَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ آذَوْا مُوسَى. Don't be, Allah tells Muslims, don't be like the ones who hurt Musa. Right? So, the exact same two parties, the Egyptians and your own people, Egyptians and your own people, but the reverse order. Subhanallah. He does say نحن نقص عليك أحسن القصص. He said it in the beginning. And actually no, I'll wait until I do explain tafsir of that ayah to drop that on you. But all of this is actually going to help us understand ayah number 3. Somebody wrote to me, do we really need to understand all these parallels to understand the Surah Yusuf? No, you don't. You don't. I do. I'm good with that. I don't think there's any end to contemplating the word of Allah. I don't think there's an end to it. And if there is something that's worthy of contemplation, if you notice something, then you make it a point to explore it. أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ. This is an ocean that doesn't come to an end. So understanding its message is one thing, but contemplation on it is a journey that will never end. It will absolutely never end. It will never stop giving. No one will ever be able to say everything that had to be extracted from a single ayah has already been extracted. One ayah is an ocean that has no bottom. That has no bottom. And we will dive into that ocean, we'll come out of it with a couple of drops. Our entire lives will dive into it, we'll come out with a couple of drops, and nobody will have the arrogance or the audacity to say, I've experienced that entire ocean, I can move on to the next ocean now. Because your entire life drenched in the ocean, you can only come out with a few drops. That's all you can do. That's all human capability is. And that's why Allah compares His words to the oceans. And even if others were added to it. I mean, who are we? Let's just, one day when COVID-19 is over, just go stand at a beach somewhere and think about the word of Allah. Think about every drop in the ocean as a drop of wisdom from the word of Allah. How much wisdom when will we ever be able to say that we've extracted all the wisdom there is to extract? SubhanAllah. Or we've experienced every drop of the ocean, we've experienced it. Every treasure lying at its bottom, we've experienced it. Every scene it has to offer, we've experienced it. And the analogy of the ocean is so powerful, it sustains the earth. The ocean sustains the earth, like the word of Allah sustains the earth. The ocean contains endless life in it. Life and life and life. And it's endless source of rizq for the world. And the Quran is a source of rizq for us. The ocean is a purifier. The word of Allah is a purifier. The ocean can be a source of mercy and a source of destruction. The word of Allah, when taken into account, is a source of mercy. When abused, is a source of destruction. The Quran can either stand for you or stand against you. May Allah make it stand for us. Anyhow, these are obvious now. Has the Yusuf alayhi salam, when everything is resolved, the family matter is resolved, he has them move back to Egypt. He has them move to Egypt with him because he's got the government job. And Musa alayhi salam is the reason they have to now move out of Egypt. So they both come into Egypt and come out of the Egypt under the leadership of a prophet. They come in under the leadership of Yusuf, they come out under the leadership of Musa alayhi salam. Then Yusuf alayhi salam in the end forgives and reunites with his own people. Right? So he says, لا تثريب عليكم اليوم. No harm shall fall upon you today. Okay, may Allah forgive you. May Allah forgive me, may Allah forgive you. It's all settled. Right? So the family's been reunited, no harm, no foul, whatever happened, happened, let's move forward. We're a family again. So they're reunited and reconciled. Who does he reconcile with? He reconciles with the sons of Israel. He reconciles with the sons of Israel. Musa alayhi salam helps the sons of Israel escape through the water, miraculously, into the desert, and they give him such a hard time, and they cause him so much pain, that eventually he has had it. He says, فَافْرُقْ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَ الْقَوْمِ الظَّالِمِينَ. Master, I had enough. Can you just separate me from these wrongdoing people? I got, like you parted me from the Egyptians, I need another parting. He's done. It's a contrast. So Yusuf alayhi salam is united with the Israelites, but Musa alayhi salam wants nothing more to do with them by the end of his career. And he separates himself from them. And finally, the saga of Yusuf alayhi salam, the remarkable story, it ends with a peaceful resolution. And the saga of Musa alayhi salam ends with a violent showdown. Right? Even that, the way the stories end, one ends so harmoniously and peacefully, and the other ends with such a clash and such an incredible, humbling. And the two, one comparison I didn't put in the notes because, my next slide is let's get started, meaning with the surah. But I will tell you one more comparison that's really important. The Quran's most recurring character for arrogance is Fir'aun. And someone who's drunk on his power. Someone who does an incredible amount of wrong. If you contrast these two stories, you find that on the one side, on the male side, you've got Fir'aun as someone drunk on his power. And on the flip side, you've got the wife of the minister who's drunk on her power. So you've got two individuals, and the way a woman, what she does, when she misuses her power, is illustrated in the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. And when a man misuses his power, it's illustrated in the story of Musa alayhi salam. So the villains are contrasted with each other. The villainous characters are contrasted. And even then there's even a more remarkable contrast. Even if someone is villainous and evil, it can be that at the end they see the wrong in their ways. So you've got two situations. You've got a situation where a person refuses to see the wrong in their ways, and even if they do see it, it's too late. And on the other, if they do see it, it's still not too late. In the case of Fir'aun, he pretends to see the wrong in his ways when the water reaches over here. And he says, "Amantu billadhi amanat bihi, bi'annahu la ilaha illa alladhi amanat bihi banu Israel." I believe in that there's no God except the ones these Israelites believe in. Yeah, that one. And Allah says, "Al-an, wa qad asayta min qablu." Now you want to believe. You were just disbelieving a second ago. Now you become humble believer? So it's too late for him. It's too late for him. On the flip side, when she's called to account in court, right? When she's called to account and she's questioned about what she did and those women did, they actually come out and say, "I was wrong. I did mess up. And I'm not considering myself innocent." Right? So one does actually redeem themselves eventually. And even the brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam redeemed themselves eventually, right? But in the case of Musa alayhi salam, you've got the Pharaoh refuses to redeem himself, and the Israelites refuse to redeem themselves. And so both the Egyptians and the Israelites redeemed themselves, the wrongdoers among them, in the story of Yusuf. And both the Egyptian and the Israelites refused to redeem themselves in the story of Musa alayhi salam, and there you have those two contrasts also. So with that, inshallah ta'ala, at least the contrast that at a cursory level I observed, I have come to a conclusion. And now it's time to get started with the surah itself, inshallah ta'ala. It's a remarkable surah. And I am in no rush to finish the surah in the month of Ramadan. So I'm not going to plow through it. It might even be that I'm going to try to keep my sessions to about 30 minutes. Maybe they'll go to 45, maybe. But what I'm going to try to do is, if I can, 2 ayat a day, but most likely an ayah a day. An ayah to 2 ayat is probably the pace we're going to move at, inshallah. But once the story starts, I bet that I'm willing to bet that probably 1 ayah a day, inshallah ta'ala. And I'm perfectly okay with that. My goal isn't to finish. My goal is to help us extrapolate some of the wisdom of Allah's words, whatever we can in our human capacity. So, barakallahu li wa lakum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Let's get started.